Chapter 31, A3 Body Problem Seed. 2. I am not. Ashkral said seriously, "Why do you think I have chosen you? Your situation is far too compatible with my unique seed. Without eyes, the void seed will be able to extract the dark energy residing within the spiritual bridge of darkness." Wait, we are in the presence of dark energy now? How come this is the first time I am hearing about it? Levi raised an eyebrow in surprise as he extended his senses around him, trying to feel it, but failing every time. Because dark energy can be utilized only by those with bloodline or evolutionary traits related to it. Across the entire shadow dimension, only a few remaining royal bloodlines with its affinity are still alive. You may not possess as great of an affinity as them, but your permanent exposure to the spiritual darkness bridge since childhood has helped you improve your affinity. Ashkral clarified, "This is a unique trait only you humans have. In the case of Nightcrawlers, it doesn't matter if they spent their entire lives in a different environment. They won't be able to grow an affinity for that said environment. They are locked with what they are born with." Levi nodded in understanding as he had read about this subject in great detail in his mother's textbooks. He understood that Nightcrawlers came with seemingly infinite types of species, each one stranger than the other. Some species had amazing affinities to poison, sand, earth, wind, ice, and some even had affinities to peculiar elements such as fog, glass, bones, gold, and such. The only elements the Nightcrawlers were cursed to not wield were the ones related to light, such as fire, magma, lightning, or even plants. It wasn't like they couldn't wield them exactly, but they could not produce light radiation. For example, lightning would become dark lightning, or normal flames would turn into black flames. Just like the black wooden umbrella, it was created out of wood, but it was dead black wood that could not absorb light at all. With the void seed, you will be more than capable of tapping into this infinite source of dark energy and use it to slowly feed it or even refuel it to utilize its related abilities. Ashkral added, "That sounds good, but what am I supposed to do with the other two seeds?" Levi frowned. "Since I need to keep growing them simultaneously, this means I need to be just as good at cultivating them as well." Levi's concerns were in place. He understood that while the void seed would not be lacking in the energy department, he couldn't replicate the same consistency with the other two seeds, especially the sun seed. After all, it was more or less similar to Shadowlife seed as it needed sunlight to grow, and this was one of Levi's greatest struggles without eyes. "Don't worry, my 9 senses seed can grow by feeding it any source of energy available. It accepts everything and rejects none. However, since it can feed on everything, it requires tenfold the amount of energy when compared to the other two seeds." Ashkral shared, "Any type of energy?" Levi was amazed. Levi understood that the world and the shadow dimension were filled with all sorts of peculiar potent energy sources, which were still being studied as they were speaking. If he could grow those energy sources, his 9 senses seed would be dealt with properly too. What about the sun seed? Levi knitted his eyebrows, knowing that it was the only seed that Ashkral shouldn't have a solution for unless he wanted him to grow through abusing growth totems and such sources. While it was doable, Levi knew he would need to hunt down Nightcrawlers 24/7 to collect their crystallized seeds and trade them for solar Aegis coins. Even then, he wouldn't be able to secure a constant supply of growth totems since the solar Aegis sanctuary used a unique system, where their resources were handled based on each holy region's rank. The Holy Heliodor's region rank worldwide was somewhat in the lower middle of the barrel, which meant their quota for all types of totems was extremely limited. Because of this, the government ensured the purchase of most of their stock and resold it to the rest of the daywalkers at an increased price of solar Aegis coins. Yet, the described situation was the most favorable. In reality, the government prioritized selling the best of totems to private agencies, lineage families, governors, and anyone with a connection to the government, like the Anti-Sleepwalkers Department, the Outpost Defenders, and such. In simpler terms, obtaining totems was an extremely difficult and pricey endeavor. That was why Jamal and Sergio were pissed at the thought of employing them as bait. "You have been taught your entire life that without eyes, you're a failure as a daywalker." Ashkral said bitterly, "Poor thing, you have no idea what you are truly capable of." "But, You were one of the main people abusing me cause of it, making me remember every day how foolish of me to dream of becoming a daywalk. There was no such a thing. Ashkral shushed Levi with a wing near his spiritual mouth. Then, he said, all I did was try to motivate you. Look at how far you came. Levi's eyebrows twitched at his shamelessness. For anyone else, losing their eyes might be considered as the end of their daywalker's dream, but you are different. Levi knitted his eyebrows in intrigue. Different? Are you saying this to make me feel good? You know that's one thing I will never do. Ashkral frowned, acting like he was insulted by his remark. True, your mouth is disabled when it comes to compliments. Levi nodded. Have you ever wondered why your eyes were stolen? Ashkral suddenly asked, have you wondered why no eye replacement surgery worked on you, even with all the technological development? Every single day. Levi squinted his scorched marks. After a thorough digging into the public data in the network, Levi had found some information that showed his situation wasn't quite unique. It was the signature motto of an infamous hidden organization called the Duskbound Order. He had heard that they were mainly employed as hitmen and assassins to high-profile daywalkers or civilians. Once the deed was completed, they would either remove the eyes of the next living entity to the target, whether it was a child, an animal, a maid, or even an unrelated stranger. If no one but the target was available, they would remove the eyes of the corpse. This was everything he knew about them, and one of his goals was to reach a higher authoritative status to find their classified data and know who had put a target on his parents. As for the eye replacement surgery, the doctors had already tried everything on Levi when he was a child, and nothing worked. Even Arthur had volunteered to donate one of his eyes for Levi, so both of them would have a chance at seeing the world. Unfortunately, even when they were blood-related, his eyes weren't compatible with Levi's. In fact, nothing was. This peculiar situation had driven the doctors to seek a different alternative, such as a cybernetic eye. Yet, to their shock, his body rejected it as well. It was like his body wanted only his stolen eyes and nothing else. Not even using high-grade recovery totems was able to regrow his eyes. While I don't know if the Duskbound Order were targeting your parents, and you ended up as collateral damage, I do know one thing. Ashkral dropped a bombshell calmly. Your bloodline may not be 100% human and there is a chance they have found out about it.
Hey!
Levi was startled. Chapter 32, Fongling. He had been listening to Ashkral for a while now and throughout all the crazy stuff he uttered. This topped it. Not 100% human? Levi just failed to believe him. I understand your misgivings, and to be honest, I am not really too sure if my assumption is correct. Ashkral replied, we will find out at night. What do you mean? There is no point in explaining it now. We will check if I am correct or not once night falls. I have a foolproof method. Ashkral said, for now, you should focus on 3 goals. Get rid of any suspicion that might implicate you in the harrowing forest massacre. Reach stage 1 in the 9 senses evolutionary path to unlock your first weapon and ability. And lastly, participate in the upcoming assembly to launder our partnership. Levi could only nod his head in understanding, putting the bloodline issue at the back of his mind for now. He had much bigger problems to solve and one of them was surviving the upcoming interrogation. I will return at night. I can't be seen with you in public, not before our contract becomes official. Sensing the approaching of multiple auras, Ashkral closed his eye and exited the Bridge of Darkness, returning to the shadow dimension. After a few moments, the room's door slid open. Shia, Sergio, and Jamal entered the room with flowers, balloons, and many packages of chocolate. Of course, Shia was holding nothing but a popsicle in her mouth. When they saw Levi sitting on his bed with the wind gently playing with his messy hair, their eyes lit up in delight. Levi, you are finally awake. Shia was the first to rush him and give him a tight hug. Levi was startled at first as he hated getting touched by people out of nowhere. As a blind person, it felt like his comfort zone was invaded against his will. But, knowing that it was Shia, he relaxed his shoulders and accepted her hug with a serene smile. You have been sleeping so long we started getting worried. Jamal shared as he dropped the gifts on the side of the bed. No one invaded your dreams? Just tell me what they look like and I will handle them. Shia asked coldly while pulling away from Levi. Thanks for your concerns, but I had a great sleep. Levi smiled. Good, we would have stayed to watch over you, but we were called to assist with the investigation efforts, Sergio said calmly as he went to kick Arthur's couch, waking him up from his coma. Once his muddled eyes settled on the light and saw his brother up, he yawned lazily and asked, Big bro, you good? Never felt better. Good. Wake me up in an hour or two. Okay. Then, he closed his eyes and went back to sleep, snoring soundly. Levi wasn't bothered by his reaction as this was how they dealt with checking on each other. As long as the other party was alive and well, there was no need to make a big deal of it. Shia and the others didn't judge Arthur's reaction as they had seen him stay around Levi ever since he woke up, uncaring that some of his wounds were still untreated. They said that love was actions, and ever since they hung around the Larson brothers, they had seen nothing but a tight brotherhood, which they envied greatly. Can you update me? Levi requested. I will tell you exactly what we heard after we woke up and found ourselves in the hospital. Shia went on and shared how the harrowing forest incident had caused a massive uproar across the entire holy region, even the capital's governor getting wind of it. If it hadn't been for Sir Fengling, who was situated at the nearest outpost and making an early move to save as many survivors as possible, the incident would have shocked even the nearby holy regions. Sir Fengling was there. Levi was taken aback. Yep, isn't he the coolest? Jamal said with an awed tone, I have heard he has gathered all the survivors and placed them on a giant wind boat, taking us straight to Tamara's settlement hospital. He didn't even wait for rescuers to come. Levi didn't hear the rest of what he said as the moment he received his confirmation, he was assaulted with faint broken memories of that dreadful night. He could remember hearing the faint agitated voices of 3 men as he was being carried on someone's back. He was at that moment constantly fainting and waking up, allowing him to hear some jumbled sentences here and there. But one memory stuck in his mind and he never forgot it. If only I came faster. Your parents might have been still alive. I am sorry, I am sorry. It was Fengling weeping silently and apologizing from the bottom of his heart as if he was responsible for their death. Levi had never understood why he did that. Why did he cry or even show this much emotion to a random child? He had searched Fengling's public data, and he found out that he wasn't a man of nonsense or such rich emotions. He always seemed cold, depressed, and couldn't care less. Yet, Levi sensed the agonizing pain and guilt of failing to save his family even when he had nothing to do with it. This always intrigued him, but he ended up dropping it eventually. I am glad we had him on our side. Levi smiled in appreciation and then asked, what about the public? Well, the government has settled with sharing this version with the public, Shia said calmly, like it was a normal occurrence to keep the public in the dark. As the daughter of Morningstar's lineage family, she had access to many secrets that would scare the citizens straight. We were the only ones seeing the monstrous entity that is believed to have killed all the spiders. Shia felt chills after being reminded of Ashkral's appearance. We have been forced to give access to our Neuralins recorded data and also sign a nocturnal contract to keep the information a secret. Did Arthur sign it too? Levi asked. Yes, but he was kinda useless to the investigation team. Sergio nodded. He was already passed out when the development has taken place. Don't worry, you will also be ruled out swiftly since you don't record with your Neuralins. Jamal assured him. I see. Levi wasn't too sure about Jamal's confidence as he knew that he had enough information on Ashkral to implicate him, blind or not. He understood that they wouldn't show mercy and would use all possible means to extract any useful information from him. So, he had to be careful about it. May I ask who is leading the investigation unit? Levi inquired. Since Sir Fengling has played a great role in saving us and was the first to bring footage of everything that went down, he was appointed the investigation unit head. Jamal added disappointedly, if I knew he was the guard appointed at the outpost's gate, I would have gotten his autograph. It's never too late, he is still in the hospital, Sergio smirked. F***ck off. You are trying to get me disciplined. Jamal's eyelids twitched, knowing that approaching a high-ranked governmental daywalker on duty for such a crap might result in terrible consequences, especially when he was involved in a serious investigation. If he is still in the hospital, I believe it's best I go visit him and deal with the matter as soon as possible. Levi shared while trying to stand up. But Shia and the others pushed him back and told him that Sir Fengling was still making rounds and would be here in a few hours at best. Hearing this, Levi decided to wait for him. What about the crystal blood flower and its variation? Levi smiled bitterly. We have gone through so much trouble, and we haven't found a single one. I am sorry it ended like this. While it's unfortunate, not all was lost. Shia smirked. I used my connections to ensure that we receive at least 30% of the slain spider's crystallized seeds. You did. Levi was surprised. He understood that the wastelands followed the rules of the jungle most of the time. In other words, the rescuers would be the ones collecting the crystallized seeds off the spiders' corpses after the survivors were taken away. Those crystallized seeds would go straight to the government's treasury. To obtain such a big chunk of crystallized seeds implied that her father must have definitely interfered. As expected, Shia went on and told him that her father had made sure not to get them ripped off after almost getting killed to clear the forest. 30% of the total turnover has rewarded us with 400 crystallized seeds of mostly Tier 1 flesh-eating spiders. Shia shared. That's good to hear. Levi sighed in relief. I believe it should be enough to buy you all the necessary materials for your perfect evolution. What are you talking about? Shia lowered her orange sunglasses and said, You think I am planning to get all of it? I am not that vile. We decided to split it evenly amongst each other. You and Arthur included. He? You sure? Levi was genuinely stunned. Chapter 33, Contract Modification. He had expected to receive money for their troubles since they were still civilians. Most daywalkers do the same, rewarding their staff and subordinates with credits to keep as many crystallized seeds as possible. It was understandable considering that crystallized seeds were traded with solar Aegis coins, the official worldwide coin for purchasing anything related to daywalkers. You kidding? You guys might not have been daywalkers, but I would rather have you on my team than most daywalkers. Sergio said solemnly. If even the cheapskate Sergio agreed to it, there was no point in asking the others. Don't think of us as strangers. Jamal smiled as he patted Levi's shoulder. We have gone through hell and came back alive. Nothing builds a stronger bond than surviving death together. They are right. You guys are now part of our squad whether you like it or not. Shia grinned. We would be honored. Upon hearing this, Levi chuckled while nodding in understanding, not rejecting their offer. After fighting amidst them and seeing how they had each other's backs, he knew it was foolish to pass on such an opportunity. Especially when the Blood Hunters Agency was the second strongest in the entire region and just being in contact with them was a blessing everyone wished for. Since you guys are showing us love, I don't mind telling you the truth. Levi confessed with a smile, I don't need a whole 6 crystal blood flowers. Just 1 and the rest of the mentioned materials. I figured you would be trying to swindle me out of some flowers, but a whole 5. Shia was astonished. You sure are merciless. It was a common occurrence for evolutionist experts to swindle the daywalkers of a higher required amount of materials. Since those daywalkers, who sought after perfect and remarkable evolutions were always loaded, they seldom cared. All they wanted was for the evolution to succeed, and if the price was much higher than standard, so be it. Of course, this worked only when considering new evolutions found and not the known ones. As you said, we are struggling with money. Levi chuckled. While I have no interest in selling my mother's knowledge, I don't mind earning money other ways. Smart. If I were in your place, I would have gotten much more. Sergio rubbed his hands shamelessly, dreaming of the day he landed on such precious knowledge. Shia and Jamal's eyelids twitched, knowing that he would be an absolute menace. If it's just 1 crystal blood flower, obsidian bloodvine, and the rest of the materials, I should have them ready in 3 days at most. The Sunstrike Agency must have an overflow after clearing the nest's treasury and will sell some of them below the market price in the region. Shia smiled widely in anticipation after obtaining the necessary funds, crystallized seeds. Although she was filthy rich, she knew it was a bad investment to trade credits for SA coins. The exchange rate was absolutely abysmal, making it extremely easy for daywalkers to get rich off selling SA coins, but the opposite for the buyers. That's why Levi wanted to swindle 5 crystal flowers, knowing that if he traded them for SA coins, he would have the choice of possessing both credits and coins for future necessities. Though, he would never cheat someone who took him in and treated him as a friend. Don't even mention friends who he had fought alongside and survived to the bitter end with them. It would take one with great evil and immorality to do this. I am about to evolve perfectly, and you guys aren't. You bums should address me with respect after 3 days. Meanwhile, Bleeder was seen making a little dance in excitement, irritating Oro and Ofnir to no end. For Nightcrawlers, evolution was everything to them. To have a perfect evolution in this climate? Phew, some Nightcrawlers and Daywalkers would actually become depressed for days from envy. Sergio, you useless fatty. How come Bleeder gets to have a perfect evolution while you are still struggling with a mere remarkable evolution? Ofnir chided in frustration. The F***ck you want me to do? He got lucky, we didn't. Sergio retorted. Levi, did you somehow hear anything related to my evolutionary path? Oro went ahead and requested Levi with a hopeful tone. While Levi knew that Ashkral might have an idea about their evolution, he still shook his head with a wry smile. My apologies, I have learned only Bleeder's species' evolutionary path. I see. Oro and Ofnir were left disappointed, but they didn't take it on Levi, knowing that such information could be obtained only through luck or trial and error. That's why being an evolutionist was a highly coveted and respected career. They needed to be extremely intelligent and have great knowledge about Nightcrawlers and their infinite species. Additionally, learn about natural treasures, and how they react to each other and Nightcrawlers to create the best formula for their evolution. They were mostly hired privately by lineage families and agencies to search for the best evolutionary paths for their top daywalkers. After a short while, Shia and the others left Levi to rest in peace. Shia told him that she would contact him once she got her hands on the materials. She also assured him that she was actively working on getting the recommendation letter to participate in the assembly. While she and the others were still on the fence about this as she knew that the assembly involved battles, they didn't want to discourage Levi anymore. If he wanted to join, let him be and he would figure it out on his own. Also, just when she was about to leave, she told him to check their nocturnal contract details. Levi murmured the serial number of the contract in his mind, and it manifested before him, leaving him quite fascinated. What a mystery! Levi knew that no matter how much he thought about it, he could not figure out how the nocturnal contracts worked. It was a mystery unsolved by even the Nightcrawlers. Thus, he could only be amazed and move on. After reading the terms, he was left stunned at the change of the penalty applied to him. He would no longer be punished by becoming Shia's lifetime subordinate. Instead, if he failed, he would be hired for 3 years in their agency. When Levi looked at the bottom and saw that Shia had already signed on the modification, he couldn't help but smile. She is quite kind when she wants to. Levi went on and removed his penalty in case she failed to help him get the recommendation letter. In his mind, there was no point for the contract to be binding and should act as a mere formality between them now that their relationship had developed beyond strangers. If she failed to help him get the recommendation, so be it. He was already a daywalker, and he would find out a different method to make his contract legit. After signing his name, he sent her a message to check the contract. A few moments later, Astra Ari reported femininely, Shia sent a thumbs-up emoji. The new contract was signed, leaving both Levi and Shia to their own characters. If they were pieces of shit, they would take advantage of this and not fulfill their ends of the deal. If they were true to themselves and their words meant more than a signature, then nothing would change. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. 1 hour later, Levi and Arthur were seen stretching on the hospital's room floor, helping each other when needed. Levi had yet to tell him about Ashkral and his daywalker's contract as he knew that they might be monitored. I missed 3 days of the gym now. I am already feeling like my muscles have shrunken. Arthur complained while flexing his biceps, touching them with a saddened look. That's just your body dysmorphia doing its thing. Levi replied calmly while stretching his legs. You think? Arthur sighed, trying his best to ignore the nagging of his mind telling him that he had gotten smaller and weaker. Just as Levi was about to assure him, he lifted his head to the sight of a small black cat floating in front of him. Hello kid, remember me? Mao greeted with a smile and a paw extended forward for a handshake. Chapter 34, The Confession. Oh, hello. Levi shook her hand and said, I believe you are Madame Fengzhimao. He knew that she was Feng Ling's contracted Nightcrawler as it was known information, but he didn't remember seeing her anywhere close before. Mao seemed to have figured it out from his reaction and murmured, I guess you were too drugged to remember. Before Levi could respond, Feng Ling came through the door with one woman and one man on his side. They were wearing black outfits with light stripes on the shoulders and the waist. They had a police-like hat on with a symbol in front. The same symbol was on their vest's chest and their pants, near a belt with attached 5 bags. On the right side of their pants, they carried a wooden page pistol with millions of tiny inscriptions. One look was all it took for anyone to feel their authoritative presence. The presence that came with working for the government. Othman, Samir, I have this covered. Feng Ling waved his hand at them and the two saluted by tapping 3 fingers on their chest. Then, they exited, waiting outside the room. Arthur. Yep, see you shortly. Arthur stood up and exited the room, leaving his brother alone with Feng Ling. After he walked away, Levi watched as Feng Ling approached him with a tint of astonishment, gazing at his overwhelming but controlled spiritual aura. It was gray and moved akin to the wind in the middle of spring. While it was nowhere near 1% of the horrific Ashkral's scarlet aura, it still made Levi understand that Feng Ling was a master of his craft. Sensing a peculiar gaze on him, Feng Ling raised an eyebrow in surprise as he stared at Levi's scorched marks underneath his messy hair. You can see me? Feng Ling asked straight away. Only your spiritual aura. Levi answered politely. Interesting. Feng Ling stood in front of Levi and made a number with his hand. Then, he waved it while asking him if he could see what he was doing. You are making a peace sign and waving it in a semicircle. Levi shared. This left both Mao and Feng Ling amazed, understanding that none of this was normal. Not even a Warden Daywalker was capable of seeing other people's spiritual auras as it needed an undisputed level of hard work and talent to iron one's spiritual vision to this degree. Yet, a teenage kid without any enhancement to his spiritual prowess or energy was already at that level. You are quite gifted. Feng Ling complimented, if you were to become a Daywalker, I highly suggest you choose the Psyche specialization. Thank you, but... Levi suddenly lifted his head in a daze. You think I can become one? This was the first time in his life he heard someone encourage him to become a Daywalker despite his disadvantaged position. Everyone else either laughed at him, mocked him, or discouraged him, fearing that he might get hurt. Why not? Feng Ling walked to the window and gazed into the distance. In my home region in the Far East, I have seen much stranger miracles. You might not have eyes and this will affect your chances greatly with Nightcrawlers, but I am certain that despite anyone's condition, there is always a Nightcrawler with the set of skills that weaponize their supposed weakness. He paused. I have seen it with my own eyes. Thank you. You have no idea how much I needed to hear that. Levi smiled in appreciation. Although he was already a Daywalker, he still felt a wave of security washing over him at the idea that someone like Feng Ling believed in him. Now, let's get this over with so we can get you discharged. Feng Ling turned around and brought 2 chairs, helping Levi sit on one and then sitting in front of him. He brought out a holographic screen and asked calmly, First, was your Neuralens device on during the incident? Yes, but I wasn't utilizing its scanning capabilities to save on battery. Levi answered, I didn't know how long we would remain in the forest, so I was being cautious. I see. Feng Ling nodded. He didn't think much of what Levi did as he knew that there was a massive difference between recording with the lens and the device's scanning abilities. The lens wasted almost no energy since it was visual feedback, but using a scan was different. The device had to scan every single rock, twig, drop of water, and the rest of the details to paint a vivid scene for Levi. This devoured a great quantity of energy. Of course, there were many roundabouts to avoid this and still use visual input, like wearing glasses with a tiny camera linked to the device, or such. But Feng-Ling didn't ask Levi about them, as he knew that it was the smartest thing Levi could do. If it was up to him, he would also get rid of the lens that was recording every detail of his life and storing it. Even if there were many measures to protect his privacy, he still hated this sensation of being monitored at all times. Unlike everyone else, Levi had an actual excuse to not wear the lens. One could say, it was one of the few things being blind in this era was good for. Thus, he moved on from this subject and continued his questioning. Share with me your experience in the harrowing forest. With pleasure. Levi nodded, willing to cooperate. Levi went on and narrated almost every single detail from the moment he met Shia, and even mentioned their deal, as he knew that Shia and the others couldn't lie about it even if they wanted. Of course, his contract with Shia involved this exception, so she wouldn't suffer from the consequences of breaching the contract. Everyone participating in the forest had their data of the incident breached by the investigation squad to find out if there were any sleepwalkers or fallen daywalkers amongst them. While this was a huge breach of privacy, no one but the investigation squad had the right to the data. They were also under contractual obligations to keep it to themselves unless the mentioned data was used for the investigation. Feng-Ling merely kept listening to him while scratching his messy beard, uncaring about him possessing information on Bleeder's species Tier 3 perfect evolution. He didn't even react much when he heard that Levi went this far to secure a recommendation letter to join the assembly. It was like he expected this much from him. However, when Levi finally reached the finale and mentioned the creeper-looking Ashkral, Feng-Ling fixed his posture immediately. You saw him too? He asked solemnly. Yes, it's hard to forget him when he is one of the ugliest entities I have ever seen in my life. Levi didn't hesitate to trash-talk Ashkral, still heated over the tattoo. Did you see what he did to the spiders or Lurker Queen? Or were you passed out like the others? Feng-Ling inquired. Matter of fact, I did. Levi confessed. Feng-Ling and Mao were taken aback by his response. They immediately leaned closer, their expressions turning as serious as they could be. Tell us everything, spare no detail, Mao said. All I remember is that Tier 3 Nightcrawler piercing my stomach with a log and throwing me back to my friends. After a few moments, I find myself all healed and waking up to the sight of that creepy entity standing inside the solar dome. Inside the solar dome. Feng-Ling narrowed his eyes. Did he seem hurt? Burnt? Anything? I don't know. I can only see his spiritual aura, and it was beyond terrifying. Levi shook a bit, feeling a chill coursing down his spine at the memory of Ashkral's scarlet aura. Seeing his natural response, Feng-Ling and Mao could tell that he was being truthful. If you were to compare my aura with him, how big is the difference? Feng-Ling unchained the limits on his aura, allowing it to run wild. Levi showed an astonished look as he gazed at Feng-Ling's spiritual aura spinning around him like an apocalyptic hurricane. Compared to other daywalkers, Feng-Ling was clearly in a different realm. Yet, I am impressed, but not terrified. Levi responded truthfully. Is that enough of a description? Chapter 35. Mistakes either make us or break us. It's more than enough. Feng-Ling nodded in understanding as he resealed his spiritual aura. I believe our assumption was wrong. Mao disclosed sternly, that monstrous entity might be a Tier 8 Nightcrawler or above. She knew that Feng-Ling's spiritual aura rivaled that of a Tier 6 Nightcrawler even though he was still a solar-bound daywalker. For his aura to be called impressive while Ashkral was terrifying, it made them understand that it had to belong to an entity above Tier 7. I feel the same. Feng-Ling nodded and then told Levi to continue with his narration. Levi went on and told them how he watched all the spiders' spiritual auras disappear after a single command from Ashkral. Of course, he wasn't using his name in his narration, always giving him a horrible adjective. Then, he passed out before he knew it and didn't wake up until he was in the hospital. He made sure not to link any relationship with Ashkral as he knew that he would put a giant target on his back if he were known to have a connection with the harrowing forest incident. Nelves told them that someone had placed a hit on Shia, which made him understand that this went beyond Nightcrawlers' humans' eternal war. If he was known to have anything to do with the failure of the assassination or the survival of 60% of daywalkers, he understood that he might not make it to next week. I believe that's all I have. I apologize if I wasn't much of a help. Levi said. No, you did enough. Feng Ling nodded in appreciation as he stood up. Then, he patted Levi on the shoulder and told him to give him a call if he remembered anything else. As he was about to leave the room, Feng Ling heard Levi's grateful voice. Sir Feng Ling, I have never gotten the chance to thank you properly for saving me that night. Truly, I am deeply grateful and will always be. When Feng Ling heard this, he turned around to see Levi bowing his head in his direction while seated. I deserve no thanks. All I did was deliver you to the hospital that night. Feng Ling said expressionlessly, Don't feel indebted to me, I am not your savior. Then, he left the hospital's room, never looking back. Othman and Samir followed him along while Arthur swiftly entered the room. After the door closed, he asked curiously, How did it go? Great, Levi replied with a satisfactory look, but in his mind, he knew that his efforts were suboptimal at best. As expected, Feng Ling and Maro were on to him. That boy is hiding something. Maro said calmly while sitting on top of Feng Ling's shoulder. Yes, but he isn't involved in the massacre. Feng Ling nodded. He is also a victim. I thought so too. He might know that entity and doesn't want to rat him out. Or, he was forced to keep his mouth shut. Yes, it's too much of a coincidence that he showed up to save everyone just when the kid's stomach was pierced, leaving him hanging on a thread. Maro said, plus, solar dome and recovery totems aren't enough to close such a wound in a few seconds. He healed him exclusively. That entity saved him, and we don't know why. Feng Ling narrowed his eyes. We should keep an eye on him, but not now. Maro suggested, we must avoid linking him to the massacre's failure for his safety. Feng Ling nodded in agreement. He was certain that this massacre was orchestrated by a higher-up in the region based on his findings related to Malak, Drawebra, and even Nelves. This was no laughing matter as it meant their holy region was compromised. This was a much more significant problem than finding out about Ashkral and his relation to Levi. After all, Ashkral might be dangerous or not to their region, but a higher-up mole? The harrowing forest massacre was nothing but an appetizer. Let's keep an eye out for the upcoming High Council meeting. We will be summoned to report the progress of our investigation of the harrowing forest massacre before all upper echelons of the region. Feng Ling narrowed his eyes coldly. The mole will most definitely be there. Asterisk. Many hours later, Levi and Arthur were discharged from the hospital at last, returning straight to their apartment. Home sweet home. Arthur smiled in bliss as he fell face first on the living room's couch. But as he thought back to what happened in the forest, his urge to relax evaporated instantly. He swiftly sat straight and requested with a solemn tone, Big bro, can you recommend some books about totems? Levi raised an eyebrow in surprise. Is this related to that time? This was the first time that he was asked about anything related to reading by his brother. This made him connect the dots to the time Arthur failed to activate the recovery totem due to not knowing the incantation. Yes. Arthur tightened his fists on top of his lap. I always assumed that strength is king and that as long as I keep lifting weights and working hard, the moment I become a daywalker, I will stamp through everything. But, it seems like I was too childish in my vision of how strength is. Arthur lifted his head and looked at his big brother. His eyes were slightly watery, but no tears were coming out. Do you know what nightmare I had when I slept in the hospital? No. Levi shook his head. It was of you, leaning against the tree with your arms busted and blood pouring out of your mouth non-stop instead of Shia. Arthur narrated his pain. I was sitting in front of you, with a recovery totem in my hand, the only miracle medicine that will save you. Yet, I stood there, mouth slightly agape, having no clue how to use it. I even asked Astra AI for help, but all she was repeating, connection lost, connection lost. All I can do is watch you bleed to death. Arthur looked at his giant hand that could break stones with a punch and smiled helplessly. I don't know if the nightmare was installed in me by a Nightcrawler or not, but the dread, the despair, the incompetence I felt, to be defeated by a sentence, I could never forget it, and I will never do. Levi smiled in gratification as he listened to his brother's troubles. He never had any intention of bringing up the moment Arthur choked at such a critical moment, wanting to see if it bothered him or not. Clearly, it did more than bother him. He couldn't sleep, and he would probably be visited by the same nightmare for the upcoming days if he didn't take SR pills. Great Nightcrawlers manipulators knew exactly where to hit one when he was down. In our life, mistakes are given. Levi said calmly while walking to the kitchen to cook something for them. To reach greatness, your road has to be imperfect, filled with potholes, and broken all over. As we tread on it, we learn where to step, when to walk or stop, and when to jump. Sometimes, our choices will be wrong, and we will pay the price. But as long as we correct them and keep on moving, we will eventually become the best version of ourselves. Levi smiled gently as a memory of their mother surfaced in his mind while making omelets. Just like what mother used to say, mistakes either make us or break us. As he finished off the 8-egg omelet plate, Levi went to the living room and placed it in front of his brother, who was sitting with his head lowered. We are the Larsons. Mistakes may crack us, but never break us, Levi added sternly, so lift your head and eat. You will need the energy for the books I have prepared for you. Then, he returned to the kitchen to cook for himself, listening to the faint sniffles of his little brother and the fork hitting the plate. Although he was built like a tank, Arthur was still a 16-year-old child. What he went through was no regular situation to just laugh at and move on. A squad mate almost died in his hands because he was too lazy to read. Although he was still a civilian, such unreliability in the wastelands was a death sentence. Levi was glad that Arthur realized the importance of knowledge this early. He knew that regardless of what he said, it would never move his brother as much as him falling into the mistake personally. For some strange reason, regardless of how many warnings we received that something was hot, we humans only learn once we get burned. Chapter 36, Battle Arts. Sometime later, Levi was seen sitting on the balcony, enjoying the calm breeze of spring with a cup of old traditional Moroccan tea. While many countries had declined after the fall of civilization and the establishment of the New World System, some cultures remained strong. Right now, he was waiting for night to fall and Ashkral to make an appearance while thinking deeply about everything he had learned a while ago about his seeds. On the other side of the apartment, Arthur was locked shut in his room, cramming everything he had skipped in school about totems, natural treasures, and such important knowledge. Levi knew that his brother genuinely had difficulties with studying. So, he hooked him up with simple books such as Solar Totems for Dummies to not overwhelm him. I heard you almost got killed in the harrowing forest. Cake, that's what you get for acting tough in the wastelands. Give the kid a break. He can't see, so he might have waddled outside, and he had no clue about it. Kakakak, good one. While it seemed to everyone else that Levi was taking a relaxing tea break, in reality, he was being disturbed by a group of Nightcrawlers. Levi had interacted with them before. They had tried too many times to seduce him, but to no avail. For Nightcrawlers, such failure was quite humiliating. Thus, occasionally, some of them would hang around Levi to annoy him as payback. But Levi didn't even give them an ounce of attention. He kept sipping the hot mint tea while brooding over the topic of his non-human bloodline. I always knew that my parents' origin isn't precisely Northern African, but I assumed it would be European or Western. Levi rubbed his chin thoughtfully, but non-human? Was he implying that I might possess a bloodline from a different dimensional race like Nightcrawlers or those behind Solar Aegis Sanctuary? With the limited access he had to knowledge, Levi knew that no matter how hard he pondered on the subject, his findings were inconclusive. He could only shake his head and be patient, awaiting Ashkral's arrival. Sometime later, as Levi was being annoyed by the Nightcrawlers on the balcony, Ashkral's terrifying cold voice resounded in the area. Trash! Haven't I warned you not to show your faces here again? Scram before I erase your existence. T. He is here. The instant the Nightcrawlers picked up on his bone-chilling order, Their expressions turned grim, and they swiftly exited the bridge of darkness. They didn't even wait to see Ashkral, as they had witnessed what he was capable of and heard much worse rumors. After the area around Levi was cleared, he lifted his head to see Ashkral appearing from a distance, flapping his tiny wings, barely able to lift himself. Levi stared at him with quivering lips. If the Nightcrawlers stayed behind and saw what the demon had turned to, his authority and reputation would be thrown down the gutter in a second. What? You never saw a handsome bat before? Ashkral sneered as he sat on top of Levi's shoulder. Nothing. I just want to let you know that we might be watched. So, it's best that we communicate telepathically from today onward until the assembly. Levi warned sternly. You failed to drop the suspicion on you. Ashkral frowned as he swiftly disappeared, maintaining a telepathic conversation. Then, a few moments later, he reappeared and told him that no one was watching them. How did you know? Levi raised an eyebrow in surprise. I have my ways. Now, speak. What happened? I was interrogated by Sir Feng Ling. Lying to him is nearly impossible without showing any sign. I tried my best to avoid getting implicated in the massacre, but my connection with you, not so much. Useless. Levi's eyebrows twitched. You are the one putting us in this situation. You just had to show off and let the others see you. If you got rid of the spiders and the goatee Nightcrawler while staying in the shadows, no one will suspect me of anything. Indeed, the smartest thing to do would have been to act from the shadows, which wouldn't have put Levi in the situation to lie. But Ashkral just had to show off his powers to him. Don't be naive. Ashkral clarified calmly. You thought I made an appearance just to show off? It was to protect us. Protect us? Levi frowned. Are you trying to gaslight me? When have I ever lied to you? That's what I thought. Ashkral carried on, taking Levi's speechlessness for agreement. If I haven't shown myself, your stomach wound will have no explanation except you becoming a sleepwalker or a daywalker. A hole was blown in your guts. You think civilians can survive it? No. Levi recognized that Ashkral was making a ton of sense. A hole was pierced through him. This was enough to kill any civilian in less than 10 seconds at most. One could argue that the solar dome and recovery totems might have delayed his death, but no one would believe he came out of it without a single scratch. While they might suspect you of having a relation to me, they won't have much proof to make a move. In the worst possible scenario, all you should do is tell them that I have forced you to not snitch on me. True. Levi nodded in understanding. Levi knew that from other people's perspectives, he was a helpless, blind kid who survived the harrowing forest massacre purely through a miracle. In other words, their first assumption would never lead to him signing a contract with Ashkral, a Tier 7+ monster. Especially when those monsters were kings and queens of nests, massive enough that they were called kingdoms and empires on Earth. Who would believe a terror of such caliber would dare sign a daywalker contract with a blind kid and reverse all the hard work and pain he went through to reach such a stage? Even if Levi were to tell people of it, they would laugh in his face. It was counterintuitive since Nightcrawlers signed such contracts with humans for the sake of evolving to upper tiers, 7, 8, 9. That's why most Nightcrawlers taking this path were Tier 4 or Tier 3, since it required their previous evolution to reverse until the Shadowlife tree returned to a seed. Levi and Ashkral's situation was simply too unique. No one would dare believe them unless they saw the awakening personally. Thus, Ashkral was right in a sense. His appearance pulled some attention on Levi from Sir Feng Ling, but it was enough to give him a legit excuse for his stomach hole. I guess I was wrong. Levi owned up to his lack of foresight without being embarrassed. He was taught by his mother that the staircase of knowledge was climbed 2 steps forward and 1 step behind to ensure that nothing was lost. Good. Now, let's see if I am right again. Ashkral shared solemnly. Go sit in the living room and wait for the holy pillar's light to descend. It's time to learn about your origins. Taking a deep breath, Levi stood up from the balcony and walked towards the living room, guiding himself with a hand on the wall. After reaching the center, he sat on the cold floor and removed his upper shirt, exposing his well-toned muscles. Astra, what time is it? Levi asked. It's 6:26, sir. Thank you. Levi murmured. The sun should be setting any moment now. As he waited, Levi couldn't help but wonder about the watering process for his seeds and if it was any different than what he read about. He had already memorized the entire Daywalker cultivation system, making him understand that each shadow life seed required from the host a constant supply of sunlight to grow until the body hit a plateau. The plateau was always reached once the seeds fulfilled 15% of their needed resources from a total of 100%. The 15% was further split into 3 mini checkpoints, each at 5%. Using this information, the Daywalker's cultivation system was born as the humans separated each plateau into a named rank, like Pathfinder Daywalker, Warden Daywalker, Solarbound Daywalker, etc. Since each 15% was split into 3 mini checkpoints, they were named as the first stage, the second stage, and the third stage. For example, a rookie Daywalker at the third stage implied that he was at 15% completion, while a Warden Daywalker at the third stage entailed a 75% completion. Each 5% fulfilled, the Shadow Life seed rewarded its host with unlocking a random innate ability that the Nightcrawler had mastered before his evolution was reversed, or a unique power-up. It was like the Shadow Life seed stored all the data of the previous evolution and used it as a reward system to keep motivating and strengthening its hosts. This was the quickest and easiest way to obtain prepared abilities. In reality, the Nightcrawlers had to work their asses off to create those abilities from scratch. The Daywalkers also needed to do the same to create the so-called learned techniques based on the evolutionary traits of their partners. Combining those innate abilities and learned techniques gave birth to the so-called battle arts, since each Daywalker could create their unique fighting style separated from the crowd. Even if another Daywalker shared the same Nightcrawler species and powers, both would have different fighting styles. For example, Shia created a new technique called the Blood Ring of Damnation that was reliant on her crescent-bladed glaive. Another Daywalker with the same Nightcrawler might be using a spear, a bow, or even a gun. This allowed him to create blood battle bow arts, spear arts, or gun arts. But he wouldn't be able to replicate her technique unless he possessed a similar weapon. In the case of Levi, he had 3 seeds, 3 evolutionary paths, 3 different skill trees, and 9 weapon variations at his peak. Yet, Levi didn't seem overwhelmed at all. He was blind since childhood, which taught him the great skill of locking his focus on one issue at a time and drowning out the rest of the noise. When one had his visionary simulation taken away, his mind was bound to be sharpened into focusing on specific tasks at a time. At this moment, Levi's focus switched immediately from wondering about his peculiar cultivation system to his origins the moment he felt the warm embrace of the Holy Pillar's light. "It's here," Levi murmured as he lifted his head, bathing half-nude under the shower of gentle divine light falling from the heavens. Fortunately, their apartment was on the topmost floor, allowing them direct access to the holy light due to the glass roof, unlike the rest of the apartments under them. After all, no way would anyone dare live in a full-glass building internally and externally. The divine light filled every nook and corner of Larson's apartment bit by bit. It was like a living creature, moving with a will of its own to light up all the dark corners, even if it wasn't on its path. This was happening across the entire Tamara settlement and Holy Heliodor's region. Just like a guardian totem was placed on the region, not a single Nightcrawler would dare step inside the light unless it wanted to turn into ashes. Only sleepwalkers, daywalkers, or Nightcrawlers chained by the divine light could survive being inside the holy regions. Try to harness the divine light into the sun seed, Ashkral said calmly. You think I am? Levi was left stunned. Chapter 37, His True Origins. It finally dawned on him that Ashkral believed his origins to be part of the race behind the Holy Pillars, Solar Aegis Sanctuary, and Solar Totems. That's because neither Daywalkers nor Sleepwalkers could absorb the divine light from the pillars, even though it was considered a higher form of purified sunlight. "Stop blubbering and do it," Ashkral scolded. Levi swiftly took control of his emotions and locked in, knowing it was foolish to keep asking Ashkral when he could find the answer on his own. He silenced all the noise in his mind and concentrated his spiritual vision on the 3 otherworldly seeds, which were orbiting each other non-stop. He ignored the Crimson Seed and the Void Seed, pinpointing his whole attention on the sun seed until it appeared zoomed in his line of sight. Seeing the fiery waves and solar flares left Levi fascinated as he felt like he was staring at an actual minimized sun. After appreciating its glory for a moment, he started envisioning the divine light penetrating his pores and guiding it straight to the sun seed. This was the known manual method daywalkers used to feed the sunlight to the shadow life seed besides using their eyes. The best and most talented daywalkers utilize both methods to accelerate the seed's growth, as they were known to sit in broad daylight and stare directly into the sunlight. The eyes were believed to be connected to the seed, which meant that as long as one stared directly into the source of light, the sunlight would be absorbed straight away by the seed. This was referred to as automatic cultivation since daywalkers didn't need to do anything besides dealing with the damage done to the retinas. The results varied from one to another, depending on how sensitive their eyes were to light. Since Levi had no eyes, this entire process was scrapped, which was more than enough reason to kill anyone's hopes of becoming a daywalker. But Levi never gave up and had always trained in secret. Trained the hated and tedious manual cultivation process, which required the utilization of one's pores. He sat cross-legged on the balcony under the sun each day for 3 hours, doing nothing but training his visualization process. He was laughed at by the Nightcrawlers every single day, mocking him for trying so hard on a dead end, ridiculing his foolish attempts to visually guide the sunlight to his empty abdomen, which had no shadow life seed and probably never will. Yet, Levi always tuned out their voices and kept his head lowered, working his ass off for this very day, trusting that a time would come when he would have his own seed. The day had finally arrived, and all of Levi's painstaking hard work had paid off. Under Ashkral's surprised and delighted expression, the divine holy light surrounding Levi started piercing his pores and swimming through his bloodstream from top to bottom, heading straight in one direction, his abdomen. As the divine light gathered in his abdomen, following Levi's visualization like he was a snake charmer, a divine symbol of a burning sun manifested at the center of his stomach. Then, each tongue started moving in different directions, painting golden inked lines across Levi's limbs and face. The moment the divine line reached Levi's forehead, the same mark of the sun was inked in the center, creating a connected circle between his seed and mind. The light produced was so intense, it crept into Arthur's room from the bottom of the door. Let the divine light perish? Is it perish you or high? Arthur's eyes, which were buried under tens of holographic screens, immediately darted in the direction of the light. Without an ounce of hesitation, Arthur bounced out of his bed like fire was set on his ass and swiftly rushed outside, thinking that a blaze was started or something. However, when he opened the door and saw the sight of his brother levitating an inch above the ground while shimmering akin to a divine deity, he froze in his place. "Brother!" he murmured in a daze, having no idea how to react. He didn't know what was happening, but seeing his brother's peaceful expression and regular breathing, he figured that he might have it under control. Thus, he made the decision not to interrupt whatever was happening. He crouched next to the fridge and stared at the divine tattoos on his brother's skin with a fascinated look. So cool. Meanwhile, Levi had no clue what was happening outside. His entire attention was concentrated on guiding the divine purified sunlight into the sun seed. But, no matter how hard he tried, the energy never reached the sun seed. The instant it entered the 3-seed spherical domain, it disappeared instantly. What's going on? Is my visualization hindered since I never trained this part? Levi frowned. While he had trained for years on how to visualize the sunlight into his abdomen, since he never had a seed in it, his training was limited to that part. He assumed that it wouldn't be much of an issue, thinking that the moment the sunlight got close to the seed, it would devour it instantly. But it looked like his assumption was wrong, and he had to spoon-feed the seeds directly like they were a bunch of toddlers. Unfortunately, just as Levi planned on thinking of other ways to do so, he felt lightheaded like he had suffered from heatstroke. This collapsed his concentration and ruined the visualization, causing the divine light to swiftly detach from Levi. The golden inked tattoo and sun symbols disappeared next, returning the living room to its usual dimming. Levi landed on the ground with a faint thud and fell on his back. His skin was red, and smoke was emitting from his pores like he had been in a sauna for hours. As his spiritual vision returned to the darkness around him, Ashkral's funny face appeared in front. He had the widest grin possible. Before he could ask Ashkral what happened, Arthur's concerned voice resounded in his ears. "Big bro, what was that? Are you okay?" "I am okay, just lightheaded," Levi replied while taking short, rapid breaths, feeling like he was cooked in an oven. Arthur went on and helped him get up. But the moment he touched him, his eyes widened at how hot his body was. "You're burning up. Are you sure you are good?" "Yes, don't worry." As he was guiding him to the couch, Levi requested that he give him an hour or two to wrap things up here. Then, he would come and explain everything to him. Arthur didn't retort or complain. He nodded in understanding and went to the kitchen, pouring a cup of water for his brother. Then, he placed it in front of him and went back to his room. "Call me if you need anything," Arthur shouted from behind the door. "Alright." Levi took a sip of the water to ease his dizziness. After catching his breath, he looked at Ashkral and said one word. "Explain." "What's there to explain? Congratulations. You are half Radian, half human." Ashkral chuckled. "Half Radian, me." Although Levi knew that no other reason could explain what he had just done to the Holy Pillar Light, he still felt surreal. Half Radian? As in the upper-dimensional Radian race responsible for the survival of the entire human species? The ones worshipped by a great portion of citizens and daywalkers, believing them to be their sole saviors? He couldn't believe it. Unlike the Nightcrawlers, the Radians rarely stepped foot on Earth as their entire support was through the solar Aegis sanctuaries across the globe. Thus, it was nearly impossible to see or meet one unless they were at the peak of authority within each holy region. To find out that one of his parents might be a Radian was no easy pill to swallow, as it changed his entire identity and destiny. But, it can't be, both my parents looked and acted just like any other human. Levi knitted his eyebrows. They didn't even possess a good potential to become a daywalker. Maybe their memories were erased, and their strength was lost in translation. Maybe, your parents were also just a descendant of the true Radian and their human bloodline ruled over their genetic formation, making them average. Ashkral said calmly, "Who knows? You might be a descendant of an ancient Radian, who descended on Earth way before the first fall of civilization. Only now did one of his descendants inherit his qualities. When it came to bloodlines, for the most part, the genes would thin out as the bloodline gets mixed with average ones over time. But, this didn't eliminate the miraculous emergence of the Radian-dominant genes down the line. This might be what happened to you or your brother. You saw his freakish physical genetics. That's not normal." Levi nodded in understanding. Once his parents were eliminated as suspects of being a Radian undercover, it opened a whole can of questions, but also answers. "I believe it might be my grandparents on my mother's side. I don't know which one, as I was told that they perished during the 3rd decade after the fall of civilization." Levi shared, "My mother always spoke highly of them and told me that they were one of the wisest people in the world." "They might." Ashkral shrugged. "Being wise isn't enough of a proof, but it does entail an extended longevity. Radian race's longevity is nowhere near humans' perception." Just as Levi wanted to comment back, Ashkral dropped the subject. "Whether it's them or it's one of your parents, it doesn't matter right now." He grinned. "What matters is that you have succeeded in absorbing the divine light, which means I don't need eyes to keep up with the other daywalkers." Levi murmured, "Keep up?" Ashkral laughed. "Boy, do you know the difference between normal sunlight and purified sunlight?" "Yes, I read that it's 10 times more potent." Levi nodded. "Well, the divine light is 100 times more, and you, my boy, are the only daywalker in the world with access to it." Ashkral dropped a bombshell, leaving Levi with his lips parted in shock. Chapter 38. The 3 Origin Seeds. All Levi ever wanted was to absorb sunlight like normal daywalkers to keep up with their growth. He had never dreamed of absorbing purified sunlight consistently, as he knew that growth totems were too pricey and unavailable for daywalkers with no network. Now, he was hearing that he had infinite access to the divine light keeping their civilization alive, an energy source 100 times more potent than natural sunlight. He ought to feel awestruck. Though, it looks like you haven't inherited the Radiant's heat immunity. Ashkral added, you need to train to absorb it properly to reduce the lightheadedness produced from heatstroke. Heatstroke? My temperature did rise immensely. Levi said while touching his hot skin. Radians are upper-dimensional entities in tune with stars. You might have inherited their ability to absorb their divine light, but it is not as great without heat immunity. Does this mean I will be suffering from heatstrokes or even drop dead if I absorb too much divine light at a time? Levi asked. Unfortunately, yes. Ashkral nodded. I see. Levi smiled faintly, not voicing a single complaint. In his eyes, it might not be as optimal as absorbing divine light like the rest of the Radiants, but it was 1,000,000 times better than what he had before. At least now, he had a legitimate chance at feeding his seeds with a quality energy source. Don't sell yourself too short. Ashkral shared, you might suffer from heatstrokes each time you absorb the divine light, but just like anything, your resistance can be improved. How? Is it through hard work or maybe changing the environment to a cooler one? Levi believed that practicing the absorption process through repetition would increase his resistance to heat over time. When combined with training in cold environments, this would definitely prolong his absorption process. Those two are standardized improvement methods that are a must. But they won't be your main method for enhancing your resistance. Ashkral pointed his tiny wing at Levi's abdomen and said calmly, you already have the missing key to negate all the shortcomings of being a mere half-radian. The Sun Origin Seed. Levi figured it out instantly. Yes. Ashkral nodded. As long as you feed it consistently, the seed will reward you with unimaginable powers related to stars. Heat immunity is one of these powers. That sounds good and all, but I tried it and failed for some reason. Failed? Yes, I followed the exact steps of manual cultivation that I have been practicing my whole life. Yet, the energy disappeared the instant it entered the 3 seeds orbital zone. I am sure the sun seed hasn't absorbed it since it showed no reacti. While Levi was explaining the situation earnestly, Ashkral was chuckling in front of his face. What's so funny? Levi frowned. Check the 9 senses seed and you will understand. Hearing this, Levi swiftly used his spiritual vision to gaze at the 3 origin seeds. When his eyes landed on the crimson seed, he couldn't help but gasp in astonishment. There is a tiny crack. Levi knew this was massive as it implied that his 9 senses seed had fed on the divine light and had started the sprouting process. How? I didn't even guide the light to it. My fault, I forgot to tell you that my seed is a gluttonous prick, who sucks any source of energy in its vicinity instantly. Ashkral chuckled. I didn't expect you to succeed in your first attempt at absorbing the divine light. Levi was left speechless. He was already struggling to understand how he was going to deal with the 3-body problem, concerning balancing feeding each seed, not to throw a tantrum. Now, he was being told that one of the origin seeds was a selfish F***CK, who wouldn't hesitate to eat what he threw at the others. Since it could absorb any source of energy in the universe, the other 2 origin seeds had no fighting chance at keeping up unless Levi made some changes. No wonder you came out like this. Levi sighed helplessly. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Now, can you please tell me what the hell is your seed and how can I tame it to avoid angering the other 2? Taming my seed? Ashkral shook his head. If only it were that simple, I wouldn't have had multiple dead partners. Are you implying I am forced to feed your seed first until I hit its plateau? Then I can share the rest of the energy with the other 2. Levi's eyebrows rose in stupor. He understood that if he couldn't stop the 9 senses seed from leeching on all sources of energy, the only thing that would stop it was the plateau at the end of the 3rd stage. In simpler terms, he had to help it reach 15% before he could consider feeding the other 2 seeds. While this wouldn't cause many problems at the beginning of his evolutionary journey, it would become a massive hurdle later on when the roots and branches would start to spread out. You catch on quick. Hearing Ashkral's approval left Levi silent for a couple of seconds. He could already envision the agony he would go through when the roots and branches of other seeds started fighting for space following the 9 senses seed. Don't focus too much on the future. We will start thinking of ways to deal with the 3-body problem after you reach the first plateau of all 3 origin seeds. Ashkral said calmly, before the sprouting of seeds, you don't have to worry. I see. Levi sighed in relief. Although this wasn't the most optimal situation, at least he could behave and grow as a normal daywalker at the lower ranks. May I know now what kind of powers you possess and what I can expect to unlock at each stage? Levi asked again. He had already analyzed the 9 senses seed powers. The only thing he came up with was that it had relations to their senses. However, the fact that it was called the 9 senses seed threw him off, as he only knew of the existence of 6 senses. Sight, vision, hearing, audition, smell, olfaction, taste, gustation, touch, tactition, and lastly, spirit sense, spiritual perception. I commend the 9 senses and anything related to them. Ashkral shared calmly. There are 5 common senses and 4 unique senses. You are already somewhat trained in spiritual perception, which is one of the 4 unique senses. What about the other 3? Levi asked eagerly. You won't be interacting with them at such a low level, so there is no point in wasting my spit. You really will do me like this? Boy, each sense is a world of its own, and if you manage to master a single one and all of its related powers, you should feel blessed. Ashkral said. It's that difficult. Levi raised an eyebrow in surprise. In Levi's mind, he could envision each sense and some of its related powers, but he could not imagine them being so difficult that he would fail to master them. Let me put it this way. Ashkral smirked. Out of dozens of partners I trained with, only one managed to master 50% of a single common sense. 50%? That's it. Levi was left agape. The fact that Ashkral had tens of partners and all of them were extremely talented and filled with potential made this achievement even harder to fathom. This fixed his perspective about the 9 senses seed and made him understand that he truly had no reason to learn about the other unique senses when he would most definitely be struggling to master the 5 common ones. If she didn't die due to the failure at solving the 3-body problem, she might have gone all the way and mastered 100%. Ashkral sighed while pointing a wing to the heavens. Rest in peace, Attica. You were a good girl. Levi's eyebrows twitched, imagining Ashkral wishing him to rest in peace after he replaced him with a new victim. But swiftly, he removed such thoughts from his mind and knitted his eyebrows solemnly. The more difficult it is, the stronger I will get. To deal with the dusk-bound order, I will need all the strength in the world. Chapter 39, New Findings. Levi understood that he was nowhere near the dusk-bound orders league, as not even the strongest known daywalkers in the world dared to touch them. One could say they were at the level of solar aegis sanctuaries across the globe and were treated with respect by all Nightcrawlers. Tell me more about those common senses powers. Levi inquired. I will teach you once you reach 5% and unlock your first weapon and innate ability. Only then will I have something to work with. Ashkral said, for now, let's move on to the Void Origin Seed and see if you will show promising results. Levi nodded in understanding and listened to Ashkral's explanation about what he needed to do to sense the dark energy surrounding him and absorb it. While the process in itself was somewhat similar to what he had trained before, the circumstances weren't. Levi soon realized that regardless of how much he focused or tried to sense the dark energy infesting the spiritual bridge of darkness, his mind came out blank. It was like he was trying to capture something in absolute nothingness. Feel it. It's right there. It's everywhere. I am trying, but I am not sensing anything. If I can't sense it, how can I visualize guiding it to the seed? As expected, it looks like you will need more practice. Ashkral said, all right, you can stop now. Levi let out a long exhale in disappointment, not too pleased with himself. Brat, dark energy is one of the hardest sources to tap into, and if you pulled it off in your first attempt, I would have kowtowed before you. Ashkral chuckled. He wasn't discouraged by Levi's inability to sense the dark energy, as he knew that it was extremely challenging and required either years of hard work or impeccable attunement to dark energy. While Levi's attunement should be much higher than humans, it was still not enough to claim him as a prodigy and allow him to sense the energy on the first try. Today was a great success despite this. Now, we have the feeding order for the seeds. Ashkral noted, you will start with the 9 senses seed, and after you hit the first plateau, you will move on to the sun seed. Simultaneously, you will keep attempting to get a feel for the dark energy and absorb it. Only when you hit all 3 plateaus will you try to break through each one by helping me evolve to Tier 2. Ashkral concluded, understood. Yes. Good. Is there anything else you want to learn? Many, but for now, I just want to know one thing. Levi knitted his eyebrows. You said before that the dusk-bound order might have been after me all along, and not my parents, due to my Radian bloodline. May I know what you meant by that? Levi knew if the dusk-bound order was found to have been targeting him from the start and not his parents, it would change everything. The implications would go beyond a paid assassination. Levi always believed that his parents had been ordered a hit on them by business competitors due to his father's invention. He was the founder and inventor of the first nightwear stripes technology. He was approached by many lineager families, agencies, and business companies to purchase his technology. However, his father refused to sell it as he desired to create his own company and build it into a business empire transcending the Holy Region's borders. After rejecting everyone, his father sought out a partnership with a lineager family in Tamara's settlement. A partnership that would ensure a consistent flow of liquidity and support from a major family. All for the price of 49% shares of the budding company. That's the business endeavor for which his father came to Tamara's settlement. As one could anticipate, Levi's parents were assassinated on the night before the signing deal, turning their children's lives upside down. After this merciless assassination, the investigation squad did everything in its power to find out who hired the dusk-bound order assassins. Even the lineage families weren't spared. Unfortunately, not a single lead was found, and all the primary suspects were dropped. The worst part? The nightwear stripes technology was leaked, and all business companies profited immensely from creating their replicas. This erased Levi's father's legacy as the original inventor, since every company put up a figurehead designer to dodge accusations of theft. Since all of this happened a decade ago, the news died out, and people moved on with their lives, not caring about who invented this or that. All they cared about was to use the stripes to illuminate their surroundings. Nothing more, nothing less. This left only a few people who still knew the true name of the inventor, Brian Larson. That's a question for you to find out. Ashkral answered casually. All I can say is that your eyes might be more special than you think. My eyes? Special. You don't think that your spiritual vision is so great because you have been blind for a long time, right? Heh, if only life worked that way. Ashkral chuckled. While being blind has helped you train your spiritual vision tremendously, a base was still needed. I believe that even after your eyes were stolen, your spiritual vision remained intact and grew stronger since it's tied up to your soul. I see. Levi frowned. Although Ashkral hadn't told him much about what made his eyes special, Levi was already convinced that something wasn't right. Otherwise, he wouldn't be blind for a decade now without any signs of vision restoration. As mentioned before, the doctors had already tried all possible methods to restore his vision, but to no avail. The money spent on those operations, recovery totems, and such had devoured most of the trust money left behind by his late parents. Those failures always eluded the doctors and government until they could do nothing but give up on Levi and place an ankle monitor to keep a watch on him in case of the worst possibility. Whether your eyes were special or not, they aren't in your possession at the moment, Ashkral said indifferently. Thinking about them won't bring them back. If you want them, you have to snatch them from the dusk-bound order personally. Is that something you want to do? It's nothing but another reason to fuel my vengeance for what they have done to me and my family. Levi nodded coldly. It's clear, this is no longer an issue of simple assassination. It goes deeper, and I am going to dig through this rabbit hole until I touch the bottom. After everything that was discussed, Levi recognized that a path of hardship awaited him, as his cultivation system might be complex, dangerous, and lead him on a suicidal path. But if he managed to succeed, if he managed to pull it off despite having a 1% chance, his life would never be the same. His world of darkness would collapse like how Ashkral showed him in the forest, and his strength would finally be enough to get him his vengeance and the answers he always wanted. Why were his parents murdered? Were they the target or him? Who ordered the hit? Why were his eyes sought after? What about his true identity concerning his peculiar Radian bloodline? Many mysteries were waiting to be solved, and Levi already had his back against the wall, forcing him on a path of no return. What are you going to do now? Ashkral asked with a faint smirk. I am already cooled up. Levi poured what remained of the cup on top of his head, causing faint steam to arise akin to cooling a sauna stone. Then, he went to sit in the same spot and said icily, I won't leave the apartment until I reach 5%. That's what I like to hear. Chapter 40. Breaking the Limit. A few hours later, Levi was seen sitting on top of a wet puddle of his own sweat. He was breathing roughly while his skin was crimson red and emitting a pillar of smoke. This was his 6th session of absorbing the divine light, and it was clear he was close to burning himself out. Still, Levi forced himself to stand, wincing from a pounding headache. Clutching his head, he staggered to the fridge and opened it after fumbling with the handle a few times. After getting assaulted by its cold breeze, he leaned against the door and remained in that position for a couple of minutes, his wet disheveled hair hiding his pained grimace. At the moment, he wished nothing but to shove himself inside the fridge. You should stop here. Ashkral warned, I know you want to get stronger fast, but consistency is 100 times more efficient than speed. I know. That's why I am not going to stop until I drop on the ground. Levi uttered indifferently, I have to test my limits and reach failure. Only then can I create a consistent and efficient pace. I see you are treating this like working out in the gym. Ashkral chuckled. Whether it's cultivation or normal workout, the human body can never tap into its ultimate potential if one always stops at the first sign of discomfort, Levi said. You are right, but also don't forget. Ashkral doubled down. There is a fine line between death and touching one's true limitation. Levi remained silent, knowing that Ashkral was right. The human body knew what it was doing by using pain as a way to deter its owner from going beyond its capabilities. If he kept ignoring it and forcing his body to experience such a high temperature over and over again, he might either pass out or drop dead right there. Although Levi knew this, he had no plans on stopping now, feeling like he could add at least 2 more sessions. Thus, after a 15-minute break to cool himself using a cold shower, Levi went back to the same place and sat on top of the previous sweat puddle, not bothering to clear it. While it seemed disgusting to others, Levi used his sweat puddle as a cooling station. After a total of 6 sessions, each one spanning between 15 and 30 seconds, the 9 senses seed now has 10 tiny cracks. This means I have completed 1%. Levi murmured to himself as he gazed at the pulsing crimson seed. The percentage readings weren't being reported by the seed or written on its body as numbers. The Nightcrawlers had taught the humans how to read the clues across the seed's growth until it reached fruition. The humans came along and simplified this system by adding percentages, since it was much easier than asking someone how many cracks or tree rings they had to check their progress. In the case of seeds, each 10 cracks implied a progress of 1%. This reading system would carry on until the sprouting stage, which occurred after the first plateau breakthrough. This means if the energy requirement remained the same and I was doing 6 sessions a day, I would reach 5% in about. Levi did the math in his mind in a second or two and then mumbled, 30 sessions in 5 days. Levi felt that he could narrow this result immensely to 3 days if he stayed up all night, doing nothing but cultivating, cooling down, and repeating the process again. He understood that if he was going this slow with divine light, then absorbing the natural daylight with his pores would do nothing but scratch the 9 senses seed gluttonous stomach. After all, he was told by Ashkral that it needed 10 times the energy requirement compared to the void and sun seeds. He wasn't an idiot. Although he wasn't told the difference between the energy requirements of the void and sun seeds compared to the shadow life seed, he understood that it would be just as significant. In simpler terms, the 9 senses seed was an abomination when it came to energy consumption, and only high-quality resources could fulfill its insatiable hunger. Thus, Levi lowered his head and continued feeding the beast against the agonizing screams of his body. Unfortunately, the 7th session lasted for a mere 10 seconds before Levi's temperature rose to a new, dangerous level, leaving him gasping for air with a dried-up throat. He had drunk more than a liter of water in the past 15 minutes. Yet, in less than 10 seconds, he felt like he was lost for 3 days in a desert without a sip of water. It was a horrendous sensation that left him crawling to the kitchen. Although he was blind, he still felt dizzy and disoriented like everyone else since it was related to the inner ear, vestibular system, which controlled balance rather than vision alone. After climbing to the counter, Levi turned on the faucet and placed his head underneath the water. Steam exploded from his head, and the droplets falling down his chin turned hot almost instantly. This was it. His limit. Ashkral knew it, Levi knew it, and if anyone else was watching, they would think the same. "Are you planning to stop now and get a prolonged rest?" Ashkral inquired. "You joking?" Levi uttered with a hoarse voice. "This is it. This is the place where the ordinary and the special are separated. If I stopped here, I would be no different than any average person. I have to break the limits. I have to at least try, regardless of the outcome." Average person. Ashkral smiled inwardly as he watched Levi staggering towards the bathroom. Does he even know that the average person would have stopped at the 2nd session after the burning sensation started to feel as real as being burned under flames? Does he even know that he has long since broken the limit of the average people and was now seeking to break his own unrealistic limitation? Ashkral couldn't help but appreciate Levi's impeccable standards he held himself to. He could tell that Levi's concept of what was normal and special was flawed from birth. This didn't surprise him a bit as he had watched him grow from a child to this youthful boy, burning with unfulfilled desires stolen from him that night. While normal people hung around each other from childhood, Levi spent his time mostly around Nightcrawlers and his brother, who was also a genetic anomaly. The only average person in his childhood was his uncle, who took them in and raised them until they became teenagers and moved to Tamra's settlement. He was even homeschooled, as no parent was going to accept having their children study next to a time bomb. How could he know what was average when the only thing guiding him was the stories he had read from books about the most powerful daywalkers? Levi felt that if he didn't take it this far, he had no place to be named next to them. Thus, after a 20-minute cooling period under a cold shower, he returned and kicked off one more session. As he focused his foggy spiritual vision on the divine light surrounding him, it responded to his call almost instantly. Unlike the first time ever, the divine light was absorbed naturally within Levi's body without creating any golden inked tattoos or sun symbols. Anyone watching him would think he was meditating under the divine light. It was like he merely awakened his dormant bloodline to absorb the divine light for the first time. After that, there was no need for such a grandiose transformation. 1, 2, 3, 4. While he didn't look like he was absorbing the divine light, Levi was feeling the rising heat akin to being dropped into a giant pot of boiling water. But he kept regulating his breathing to fight off the dizziness while counting down each second. His spiritual vision never left the massive crimson pulsing seed, which appeared to be sucking off any particle of energy that entered the seed's field. As it kept eating the golden particles, tiny cracks started surfacing across its body. Levi zoned out completely on the cracks, not hearing even his thoughts. All that was on his mind was to keep adding the cracks, no matter what it took. 10 seconds, 12 seconds, 15 seconds. This left Ashkral astonished and a bit concerned as he could feel the same burning heat and knew that it wasn't to be scoffed at all. While his pain tolerance had already reached a new freakish height, Levi wasn't the same. This made him feel that if Levi kept going at it, forget breaking his limit, he was going to melt his organs off. "Boy, cut it off. You have done more than enough for the day." More.